Hi, horse friends. In today's video, we are going to talk about a controversial topic in young athletes being groomed for sexual abuse or just abuse in general by their peers or superiors. There was a case in Northern Ireland with Jonathan Creswell and Katie Simpson, who was murdered, as well as Lyle, who had convicted him several years ago. I'm going to give you a synopsis on this situation because unfortunately this happens far too often, where there are cases that really just aren't taken as seriously as they should be. I will also post a very in-depth video that we did previously in the cards of this video. So Lyle is a dressage rider in Northern Ireland, and several years ago, she was dating Jonathan Creswell, and she said when she met him that he was charming and friendly and just a wonderful person. He was a show jumping trainer, and she was infatuated with him. And she said everything was going great. They started dating. And then she started to notice that when they would get in an argument, he would get overly aggressive, to the point to where one night they were driving home and they got in a disagreement and it escalated. It escalated to the point to where he drove her into a forest and he smashed her head into the car several times, causing lots of bodily harm. She thought she was going to die. She thought she was going to die. And then it's this case of, if you look at her story, of this cycle of abuse, where he would do something terrible and then he would apologize. And then she said she would feel like she could breathe again. Essentially, she wasn't threatened. Now, the problem with these...
Typical of, your abusers and your narcissists. And
Yes. Yeah, it's just that cycle of control, that cycle of abuse. So she did end up prosecuting him, and he did get convicted. Now, this is crazy to me. Okay, I don't know what laws are like in Northern Ireland, but he only got 6 months for basically threatening to kill her. And he had good behavior in prison because, that's what they do. They can pretend like everything's great. So he got out in 3 months.
If you think about it, if somebody's victim or their targets is women or more, I don't want to say weaker necessarily, but somebody that is easy for them to overpower or to manipulate or whatever else. In prison, they're going to have people that are more potentially dominant or just stronger than that person. Everything else, they're not going to be that easy target. So yeah, in prison, in jail, they're going to be good behavior because they're not causing problems.
They don't have attention. Yeah, that's
right?
True. Yeah.
They're not going to win that fight or that power and that control. So they're going to be behaving themselves.
Yeah.
Because it's not worth it for them to
try. They're not going to get anything out of it. Yeah.
That's not always the case, but it is a perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So he got out. And when he got out, the show jumping community threw a party for him, welcoming him back. They were so excited to have him back after he had been convicted of doing this to a woman.
They threw a party?
They threw a party. They threw a party for him. And Abby, yeah.
And okay, so you say the show jumping people, like his group, like his barn?
That's just the community in general. They threw a party for him after
he... it makes it any better. It just seems like if it was just the barn or something, it's a small amount of people. But this I'm thinking is like a huge group of people.
Yep. So Lyle said at that point, she realized where she stood in this, and that to do the best for herself and her horses, she would just stay quiet and fly under the radar and focus on her dressage. She did end up competing at the Paris 2024 Olympics. Now, unfortunately,
that also has to be you see that and you see the people and you're like, they did not believe me.
No, they did not.
To have that and in your face, to have people celebrate the person who harmed you getting free.
Yeah. How painful does that have to be? And so as a result of nobody believing her, in our opinion, yeah, it's why Katie Simpson died. And if people had probably taken her seriously, this might not have happened. As you can see, this is a very emotional topic to talk about. It doesn't just happen to one person. This happens to many people. And Abby Lyle discusses in her recent interviews, she had to go through all of this and reliving it to help prosecute Jonathan Creswell, as well as do a documentary right before she competed in the Paris Olympics. What was supposed to be the highlight of her life ended up being a very, very emotional time. And I can't imagine what Katie Simpson's family is going through, knowing that this possibly could have been prevented had Irish court taken this more seriously, had the equestrian community taken this more seriously, and their daughter could be alive.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not okay. This happens so often. And this Irish rider, the strength that it takes for her to stand up against her abuser, to take him to court, somebody who's threatened to kill her, in her mind, I mean, that's scary. And then he gets out in 3 months. What's he going to do? Is he going to go back and kill her?
Yeah.
I mean, you worry about those people.
Well, it makes you angry too.
Yeah.
And I hope, for her sake, for her mental health and everything else, that she's doing what she needs to for herself. But I also hope that she's pissed.
Yeah.
And I hope that, Katie's family is pissed and that they get loud.
Yeah.
To get the changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because honestly, it's bullshit.
Yeah, it really is. And this has happened all across America, right? Which is why we have SafeSport. And we're also going to be doing a story on the Silas murders as well, too, in Chicago in the 60s. This is not anything new. We have the convictions with Rich Fellers. We have George Morris. We have a lot of these trainers and people that are abusing their power.
Yeah.
And it's an abuse of power. It really is, because
well, that's all it comes down to with any form of abuse, grooming, and anything else. It is power and control.
Yes. 100%.
In any aspect of it, regardless of whomever the victim might be, the person perpetrating the crimes and the abuse is doing it for the purpose of power. And it goes into the same thing with animal abuse.
Yeah, it does. And that is also a reason why I want the animal abuse list, because they say that people that abuse animals also abuse people too. So it's a sign. And SafeSport, sometimes I find it annoying, but it's really a good thing. And
I'll take some of the annoyances of having to do that for the protection of other people.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to minors.
And in the U.S., for those of you that don't know, SafeSport was the instigating factor in it was the United States gymnastics team case where a physical trainer was abusing the young girls on the team. He was working with them solo and committing atrocities on young girls. And for those of you internationally that don't know about that, I really suggest that you take some time and look that up. And I would love for our European factors to tell us, do you guys have anything similar to SafeSport? Here in the US, we have to take a training. When we're a coach now, we have to go through this process. We have these rules that we have to abide by to help these situations.
The training and the SafeSport compliance and everything, it's all online. So it's really not that much that you have to do, as far as you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to take classes and do physical tests or anything. It's all online. It's fairly quick and simple, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's really easy, but it gives you things to look out for students and the athletes that we think might be getting abused, especially minors, like I said. But but it also gives you like contact information on ways to report people if you think that something is going on, and ways to remain anonymous if you need to for your safety or you want to.
See something, say something.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it just gives you regulations and rules and stuff. So like, for example, as a trainer and instructor and everything else, I am not to individually text my minor students without one or multiple guardians or parents being in that text chain. And that makes sense.
Yeah, it's easy enough to do with technology.
Yeah. And it's a layer of protection both for the student, but also for the trainer, because then if somebody wants to claim something against you, you can be like, hey, parents have this is the conversations, this is whatever.
I also feel like, it's interesting because on the flip side of that, I kind of wish that there was a way for the students to know to have a education on their end about things to look for in a trainer when they are breaking SafeSport or when they are doing things inappropriately, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to make these videos, because it's important for us as professionals, but it's also important as a young person to know what a trainer should not be doing. A trainer should not be spending excessive amount of alone time with a young person. Or any person, right? They shouldn't necessarily be flattering you or asking for time outside of the barn by yourself. They shouldn't have these patterns of not treating you well and then apologizing. If anything feels awkward to you, you can report to SafeSport. Yeah. There's a lot of different patterns that these young people need to look for.
And I want to point out to you is like, we talk about minors, we talk about different things, but there is within SafeSport rules and regulations. There's an age rule that I don't want to say gap and everything else, but they do have a thing where it's like, okay, if they're 16 and 18, whatever, but then they look at, the position of power.
Oh, right.
Right. Because, okay, 16 and 18, that's a couple of years different. They're both still fairly young. 18-year-old in the United States is a legal adult, but they're still young. They're still a kid. Okay, we look at the position of power, but it also goes for, okay, you have a 21-year-old and a 26-year-old or something. Again, I think within SafeSport, off the top of my head, I can't necessarily remember, but I believe it's a 4-year age difference. So that would kind of be beyond that 4-year, but again, it looks at the positions of power and authority, right? Who has the position of authority? Is the older party there in a position of authority over it, and are they using their position of authority and power over their younger person or their student, their trainer, different stuff? Because you have had, and you do have, people who are in relationships with their trainer or something, but it's a normal, flourishing, good, healthy relationship, right?
One of my best friends had that.
Yeah. And to, again, the age difference and everything
and they're still married.
Yeah. And then, because then you can have somebody who's in their mid to late 20s and dating somebody who's in their later 30s or whatever else, and it's not looked at all that, you have that age gap, it's something else. And again, with Super Sport, they do look more towards the younger side in the minors, but there can still be
exactly
with the adults.
It's not age or gender discriminative.
Yeah, abuse isn't discriminatory in anything.
No, it's not.
But
yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us, and let us know if you have any questions or thoughts on this sensitive topic, and we'll be talking about this some more.